There's really only one way to become a writer, and that is your way. And here's the story of how I became a writer. My name is Mike Deneen. I'm a professional copywriter. My title is an Associate Creative Director of Copy in a small advertising agency. I'm also a self-published author. I have one novel. It's called Latcher. It's out now. You can get it. And I have another one on the way. I always tell people that I was born a writer. I came into the world knowing that I wanted to write. Probably the thing that makes that the clearest for me is that I distinctly remember when I was a child, maybe around 9 or 10, having this almost an epiphany that when I realized that not everyone wants to write stories. So what that tells me is that I just naturally want to write and create stories. So much so that I just assumed everybody wanted to do that in the same way everybody needs to eat, needs to sleep, needs to have fun, needs to laugh, all those things. So that's the first step in becoming a writer, is just naturally wanting to be a writer. However, it's obviously not that simple. There's a lot of things you need to learn along the way, a lot of things that you need to make clear to yourself. And well, it's a journey. Your journey will be unique to you, but becoming a writer really is a journey that you have to go on. So the place that I got started with writing, and maybe most people do, I know that some people are different, but would be through writing poems and short stories. So if you are interested in getting started as a writer, I would start there. You could also write nonfiction pieces as well if you prefer, but if you're a creative writer like me, that is a great place to start because those mediums are small enough and short enough that you can finish them in a shorter period of time. Writing a novel obviously takes a long time. Some people it takes much longer. So I wouldn't start there. That being said, some people might just naturally be novel writers, in which case go for it. But start out small. Start out with poems or short stories. And that isn't to say that poems and short stories are easy. In fact, they are, some would argue, more difficult to nail than a longer piece of writing because you don't have so much space to accomplish all the things you need to accomplish in a story. However, they're easier in terms of time commitment. So start there. That's where I started when I was a teenager, just writing poems that would come to me, little short stories. Even before I was a teenager, I was writing short stories. So start small. That's all you need to do there. Another thing you really need to consider is accumulating experiences. So after my adolescence, I graduated high school. I didn't go directly into post-secondary school. I did a little bit of traveling and moving around. I moved to a couple of different cities in Canada, and then I went overseas. I went to Australia for a couple of years before I kind of buckled down and started my degree in creative writing, which I'll talk more about in a moment. But those experiences, the traveling experiences, were huge. They're huge. These are the sorts of things you need to accumulate so that you can draw upon them when you do want to write stories. Because it just widens your imagination, and it widens the things that you can, this old adage to write what you know. Well, if you know more things, you can write more things. So if you are anything like me, you are going to be curious about different experiences, meeting new people and different people, and kind of pushing yourself and challenging yourself to just widen your imagination. And that is an integral part of becoming a writer. I mean, you can't live in a shoebox and become a writer. Well, you could maybe. I don't know how good you'd be. You need to have experiences, life experiences. And you need to do what I like to call watching the world. So if you are a writer, it's going to come naturally to you. You're going to be curious about the world around you, and you're going to watch it, and you're going to study it, and you're going to bank all of these experiences and emotions and feelings you have. And you're going to be able to use those in the things that you write later on. So put yourself out there, experience new things. Traveling might not be right for you, but could be in the jobs you take when you're a young person. I worked in the hospitality industry. I worked as a bartender, a waiter. I worked at a drag bar for 3 years. Now, I could write you a whole novel about what it's like to work in a drag bar. These are all things that, and I'm also very introverted, and I'm not the most, I mean, I am outgoing, don't get me wrong, but I'm pretty shy. I know I'm sitting here talking to a camera, but this to me is much easier than talking to a group of people. So those jobs you take, whether it's in hospitality or whatnot, might not feel right for you. They might not feel like home or that you belong exactly. I never did. But think of them as experiences. Think of them as, because you will be glad that you did those things once you are a little bit older, because you just have such a well of experiences to draw on for your stories. So that was my early 20s. Most of my 20s was just experiencing new things. I also did a stint as an exterminator. Random, I know, but again, it was all fueled by my interest in people and in the world and psychology, all those things that make for great stories. Another thing you're going to want to consider is school. Now, again, I was told to follow my dreams, so I did that. So I assumed that the best school for me would be an undergrad in creative writing, which I completed. Now, I do think it was a good experience. One thing to keep in mind is that university doesn't teach you very many practical skills. It's more about teaching you how to think and how to shape your thoughts. It's not about teaching you, how to write a novel or how to create incredible characters. Those are things you probably learn more in college programs, I would assume. So although I getting a degree really helped me in getting jobs after, I don't know that it necessarily taught me a lot about writing. So that's just something to keep in mind. Because you might want to consider a career that isn't in writing. Now, just bear with me there. The thing because I'm a professional writer, I write every day for my employer. It takes a little bit of my writing energy out of me. So if I was doing something that wasn't writing involved, but could maybe still be a little more creative or whatever it is, maybe I could be a lawyer, who knows, anything. If I was doing something like that, then I would have all of my writing energy saved for my personal writing. So the thing is, what I'm getting at is your career doesn't have to be your dream. I'm just going to use lawyer, for example. I mean, I don't want to be a lawyer. I have no no interest in this going through that schooling and paying all that tuition and, doing whatever it is a lawyer does. I don't know. I'm drawing on what I see on TV, but I'm sure being a lawyer is much more tedious, much more paperwork, all that sort of stuff. But so obviously I'm not passionate about being a lawyer, but you don't have to necessarily be passionate about your career, because you have your side passion. Your writing is something you can do in the mornings, in the evenings, on the weekends. And I'm sure you know this, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but the number of authors who make a living off of their novels is, I don't know the percentage. I think I remember from university them telling us that it was under 10% of people. It's probably may even be less. I don't know. So all of this to say is that your career, you don't necessarily have to. Following your dream isn't necessarily about getting a career as a writer. But keep that in mind, and think, and maybe lawyer was a terrible example, because a lawyer, I'm sure, is a very busy career. You can also consider a career that doesn't take a lot of energy or a lot of time. Something that doesn't require you to think too much. There are tons of, maybe, what about construction? There's all kinds of different things you can do that will make room for your writing passion. I did consider for a while becoming a teacher, because teachers have the summers off. And that's great. That's a great time to get some writing done. The challenge with that for me was that I don't particularly enjoy being around children. So that becoming a teacher was maybe a bit silly. Hence, I didn't pursue that. So anyway, the moral of the story here is that you don't need to follow your dream as a writer. You don't necessarily have to become a professional writer. So after I finished university and I finished working in hospitality, I got my first job as a freelance proofreader for a professional training company. Yes, extremely dull. But it was my doorway into the kind of 9-to-5 world as a writer. So something I would consider, I do know with the invention of AI that a lot of these jobs are kind of not being made redundant. We're always going to need writers and proofreaders and all those folks. But with AI, you need fewer of them. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're choosing your career path, is that technology might make you redundant. You want to think about things because you got to make money. You don't want to be a bum writer who lives up other people's kindness. You want to be able to take care of yourself, and that is not just for practical reasons. It's also about, I think, personal, about dignity, really. So there I am as a proofreader at a professional training company, and they eventually hired me as an instructional designer. So in essence, what you do is you write training manuals. Yes, incredibly dull, but it gave me that experience, and it helped me get my second job a couple of years later as a proofreader at an advertising agency. Now, that is a career path you might consider, because believe me when I say that the creative departments in advertising agencies are full of people like you, people who are creative, who have side hustles, who might have envisioned their life as an artist or a writer, but they, again, you got to be able to pay your bills. So you need to find a place where your writing and your creativity are valued and needed. And advertising is a great industry to think about. You also just meet really cool people while you're there. You'll build interesting contacts in the creative industry. So I started as a proofreader in an advertising agency, and they eventually hired me a couple years later as a copywriter. Now I'm just going to spell that for you, because a lot of people think when you hear copywriter, they think something legal. They think COPYRIGHT, copyright. But in advertising, it's called copywriting. It's one word, COPYWRITER. A copywriter is someone who not only writes copy is, the words that are in brochures, on websites, all those sorts of things, but they also have to come up with ideas for campaigns, for brands. So you really will draw upon all of your skills and interests when it comes to being a storyteller in advertising. Another interesting thing about advertising is that they use all of the things you create will use the fundamentals of creative writing. And I learned much more about storytelling in advertising, in the advertising world, than I did in university. Think about that. I learned how to create characters because every brand fashions itself around an archetypal character. So if you think of Nike, the character of Nike is the champion. So everything that goes into Nike's branding, all of their commercials, all of their copywriting is through the lens of a champion. Or another one example would be Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson's character as a brand is the outlaw. So these are all things that you're going to need to know to write great characters and great stories. So consider it. The only thing I would caution with the advertising world is that it can burn you out, because if you work for an agency like I do, an agency represents other clients. It's quite volatile. It's up and down. Clients are hiring you and firing you. There's a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of really unrealistic deadlines. So you can get a little burnt out, and you might not have a lot of time for writing. I've kind of found a way to build writing into my life in a way that works. But anyway, this is just something to consider in the advertising world, if you do choose that path. But that also calls into question whether or not you need to work in the 9-to-5 world like I do. You don't have to. It really depends on your personality. For me as a writer, the thing that I really needed to build and to establish in my life is stability. Now, that's a personal thing for me. I mean, it's probably pretty common. You need to be in a stable place to actually produce things, to complete things, really. You might have a vision of, this sort of badass writer who, flips the bird to the man, who travels the world and just has these, fascinating philosophical thoughts and experiences that he or she turns into stories. That could be you. If you can pull that off, have at it, because you're going to produce really cool writing, probably. But keep in mind that it might not work for you. It doesn't work for me. I need a stable home. I need a bed to sleep in. I need proper meals. I need to be able to go to the gym. I need all those things that are built into the 9-to-5 life. I need my evenings off to relax. I need my weekends off to spend time with people. All those things. Those things allow me to be the writer that I want to be. I was still a writer back in the day when I was an adolescent and in my 20s, but I didn't have that stability in order to complete things. So that's a really, if you want to become a writer, the difference between people who want to be writers and are writers are the latter, complete what they start. So my youth, I spent a lot of time having ideas for what I wanted to write and starting things, but I didn't complete a lot of things. I did complete some things, but not as much as I wanted. And it wasn't until I had that stable foundation that I was actually able to sit my butt down in the chair and write a novel. So if I will put that as a pretty relatively hard fact that you need to accept, is if you want to be a writer, you need to complete what you start. You don't have to complete everything. You know, I have 2 manuscripts under my bed that are unfinished. I don't know if I'll ever finish them, maybe. But you need to at least produce some things. You need to finish that short story. You need to finish that poem. You need to someday finish that novel. So what the 9-to-5 world brought me was stability. I mean, it brought me a paycheck too, so that I can take care of myself. But it helped me build routine and habits and stability into my life. And I need that to be able to be a writer. So what that really did for me was it allowed me to build writing as a habit. Now, what I did as I was in my 9-to-5 career, I'm sort of working my way up to the position I'm in now, but I didn't quite have the habit of writing built into my life. So that's one thing you need to do as well to become a writer, is make writing a habit. So again, I'm going to go back to ideas, and the difference between ideas and action here is naturally you will have a lot of ideas, and you probably will have a lot of inspiration to write things. But it took me a long time to realize that the ideas and the inspiration to write something is separate from the act of writing. They're obviously related. You can't have one without the other. However, the act of writing, you probably won't feel that high or that spark that you feel when you have the idea for what you want to write. Because ideas, this is what I always say, ideas are fun, writing is hard. Some authors will tell you, no, writing's not hard. That's nonsense. Well, you know what? I don't know who these writers are, if they have some secret to make writing not hard, but I don't know what it is, because writing is hard. It takes a long time to write a novel. It's frustrating because you need to go back to the beginning and change things. It's a lot of work. And of course it's fun. There's moments when it's fun. But it is a schlep, if you will. But one of the things you can do to become a writer is build writing as a habit. And the way I did that was I started a blog, and I wrote 1 blog a week for a few years. And the blog eventually, it died out, not because I gave up on it, just because I was finished. I was finished with all the things I wanted to say in that blog. So that's one thing you might consider to build writing as a habit, is to start something like that, something you can chip away at each week. Maybe you could try journal writing as well. I've never been a great journal writer. But it's nice to do something like a blog that you can put out into the world. Nobody might read it. Maybe just your mom will read it. My mom reads mine. But there will be some people who read it, and maybe it will go somewhere. It doesn't have to. But the point of it is to build that habit, so that when you get up every morning, you're thinking about writing. I need to write. I want to write. There's things I need to write. So build that habit. It's the moral of the story. Now, so here I am. I'm working in advertising. I'm sort of climbing the ladder, if you will. I'm now at Associate Creative Director of Copy. So that's sort of, I don't know if it's middle management. I don't know. So then there will come a point when you think you're ready to write the novel. I wrote mine during the virus, during the lockdowns. And I think a lot of people wrote books during that time because, what else are you going to do? But looking back on that process of writing my first novel, I could have done that now. You don't need lockdown necessarily. All you really need is 1 or 2 hours in the morning. Most take those mornings, reserve your mornings for writing. If you have children, you might need to get up earlier before the kids wake up to squeeze in that hour. But that's all it takes really, is 1 hour a morning, 5 days a week. You can miss a day here and there. Some days you might go longer. Maybe on the weekend you throw in a few hours of writing if you're feeling fresh. And you can write a novel in, I'm going to say, a year. My novel, Latcher, took me 15 months from the moment I started it to the moment I self-published it. And so that includes editing, beta reading, all the things. So you could squeeze that down to a year, or you can make it 2 years, whatever. There are writers out there who seem to write a book every month. I don't know if I've ever read any of their novels. Are they good? I don't know. There are, of course, these geniuses, or the word freaks keeps coming to mind. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense of the word. I mean it in the they have a unique gift to be able to write a novel in 1 month. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of a summary, and I'm just winging it here. So let's take a moment I'm just referring to my notes. I have some notes here. What I did this morning, instead of getting up and doom scrolling, as I got my notebook out and I wrote down what it is I might want to talk about today. And I arrived at the question, how to become a writer. So I assume you're born a writer, because I was born a writer. I'm sure we all are. So that's number one. You're born a writer. Number two, start somewhere small. Start with short stories or poems or some other something you can complete in a short period of time, right? So that's just kind of like, think of it as a sandbox that you're playing in. Start there. Number three, accumulate experiences. For me, that was traveling and working in hospitality. Hospitality is great. I mean, if you can do it, because it's a great way to just watch people and see the real world, So accumulate experiences. That could be traveling, whatnot. It's up to you. So, because you're going to need those later on when you write stories. Number four, to go to school or to not go to school. Think about it. I mean, look at colleges too. Colleges will teach you more practical skills. University, there are a lot of jobs. If you do want to work in the field of writing, you may need a degree, an undergrad degree, because when I look at job postings, a lot of them just say that you need to have a degree of some kind. It doesn't have to necessarily be in that field, but they just want to know that you can commit to something and that you've learned how to think and learned how to write and all that sort of stuff that university teaches you. Then number five, you need to build stability into your world, whatever that might look like for you, because writing is something that, it's like Virginia Woolf said, you need a room of your own to write in. That's not a direct quote, but everyone needs a room. So when to have a room to write in, and this is a metaphor, you do need a room, but metaphorically you need a room. You need the space, the time, the stability to write. So those are things that it may take time to build. And if you're anything like me, you're a creative person, so you probably have emotions that are a little bit more intense than the world. You might have a little bit more anxiety than the rest of the world. All these little things that might get in the way of writing, that you need to find a way to build stability, to be able to kind of lessen the impact of your creative personality. I mean that with love. And number six, you need to build writing as a habit. ideas are fun, writing is hard. So you're going to naturally have ideas and inspiration and this urge to write. But that is a different thing than actually sitting down and writing it. Because if you are going to be a writer, you need to be able to complete things. You don't have to complete everything, but you need to complete some things. So there may be more than 6, but those are the main 6 things to becoming a writer. And, again, remember that there's only one way to become a writer, and that is your way. All right, well, thanks for watching, and give me a follow. I'm not new to creating videos, but this channel is new, and it's just nice to have a community. It's nice to know that people watch or read your stuff. And that will just be an ongoing thing because it's hard to build an audience. But that's the thing with a writer. You gotta just keep putting yourself out there. Keep putting yourself out there. Keep writing things and throwing them into it might feel like you're throwing them into some sort of void, but do it anyway. Just keep going. All right.